Okay, hello, all you crazy Musicto people. Welcome to another live Curator interview, and this week we're we're chatting with Cormac. Cormac from the Music to Catch Feelings playlist. Cormac, hey, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing, Andrew?
I am irrepressibly optimistic as always. Trying to keep myself calm because I'm looking forward to today.
Yeah.
So what's nice about doing this session is that you've answered your 10 interview questions. I got to say, Cormac was one of the early curators who came on board, well back, last year. And I remember you and I chatting when we were in Barcelona about, how this would go. But looking at your answers on the question as to what you're currently doing, I mean, you have concert promotion, concert organizing, you've got DJ, you've got artist management, you're running a music incubator. How the hell did you end up in all of that? Give us the 5-minute intro to Cormac.
Sure, I'll give you the short version. It starts outside of music, actually, funnily enough. So I'm about a year out of university right now. And I went to school here in Toronto, where I'm from, for journalism. But while I was at school, I got involved with the student union. And part of the thing we do is every year we host a Frosh concert. And so the year I did it, our team decided, okay, we don't want this to be any Frosh concert. We want this to be like the biggest and the best Frosh concert. So we kind of worked our asses off that summer, and we actually ended up bringing Drake to our campus to perform at the concert. So it was like the biggest Frosh concert we've ever had. It was all over the news. It was incredible. It was like, because it was an amazing kind of homecoming story for him. Like, Drake shows up, performs for free for university students in Toronto, his hometown. And that feeling that I got while I was organizing the concert was just incredible. We ended up running a bit over our budget, and so we ended up building the stage ourselves. So I stayed up for almost 48 hours straight, building the stage all night with my team. And it was like fucking terrible, but it was amazing at the same time. And that feeling was incredible. And I was like, I loved the interviewing and the writing and stuff I was doing in journalism, but I was like, I've never had this feeling before, and I wanted to chase it. So I ended up interning at a company called Smash Mouth Entertainment here in Toronto. No relation to the band. Don't ask me why it's called that. I can't tell you, but we do. So while I was in school, I interned there, and now I work full-time there. And so we do two kind of divisions. The first is concert production and promotion. So we do a lot of hip-hop shows that come through the city. And the second is artist services. So we currently have 3 artists that we manage, 2 from Toronto, 1 from Indianapolis. And yeah, that's kind of that side of things. And then the flip side is that Smash Mouth is a very small company. So I only get paid when we get paid. So it really depends on how many concerts we're doing, how well our artists are doing, and whether if our concerts sell out, we make good money. If we take a loss, that comes directly out of our pockets. So my kind of day job to keep the bills paid and these lights on is the music incubator at Ryerson University. So coming out of school, Ryerson which was my university, is trying to take a step into the music education space. And so the first thing was launching this incubator, because the school has a very successful tech incubator. It's ranked #1 in the world, and they've started splintering it off into different industries now. And so they needed someone to help run the day-to-day operations of it. And so that's what I do, mixed in with everything else. Yeah.
All right. So there's an awful lot in there. What was the degree you were doing?
Journalism.
Journalism. What is Frosh concert? What does the Frosh stand for?
Oh, sorry. Yes. So Frosh is the first week of school, and it's for all the new first-year students.
Okay, so we would have, where I grew up, we would call it Freshers Week. And
there you go. Yeah, Freshers Frosh, same idea. Yeah.
Who had the idea to get hold of Drake?
Yeah, I mean, there was about 4 of us on the team, and so that was at the start of the summer. That was our goal, and And then we kind of worked different angles to make it happen. And initially it wasn't going to, and then it was, and then it wasn't. And then last minute it was like, okay, let's do this. And it was a hell of a...
On the phone to him saying, dude, you got to come and do... I mean, how did it go down?
Yeah, well, we couldn't talk to him. We're talking to like the guy who talks to the guy who talks to Drake, you know? It's like a whole thing. And I remember it was funny the weeks leading up to it. We never talked to them during the day. They would only call us after midnight. So it was like, you had to be up and ready to go. And it was just very like working with their team was very smooth, like operationally, but it was just like, they have so much going on and they didn't know if they would be able to come, and we didn't know if we could afford it because there's obviously a price tag now. They obviously did us some favors coming back home, but he had been in New York, and so he had to find a way here, and it was just total logistical nightmare, but it worked out and it was incredible. Yeah.
Were you like the gods? Because people organized.
Yeah, briefly, yeah, briefly.
It is an amazing feeling, though, isn't it? And there's something about the music industry that just has that. You get a taste of it, and you want more because it's. I don't know of any other industry like it. Exactly,
and it was like coming up to my graduation. I was looking at, okay, either I'm going to go try to work for a magazine or potentially a newspaper, which I like, but it's. Like thinking about music, some people thought I was crazy for jumping into music because I had done this whole degree, right? But it was kind of like, it wasn't like I was deciding between an $80,000 accounting job and the music. It was like journalism, which like, okay, is kind of risky already, or jump into music. And I was like, if I'm loving this, like I'm just going to go head first into it. And I've always kind of DJ'd and stuff. And so it was a natural kind of transition into, okay, let's try to make this an actual career.
I mean, there are so many... the music industry has, changed a hell of a lot over the last, 15 years or so.
Yeah.
But having said that, some of the fundamentals are still exactly the same. And the whole act of going to see a music act or going to see a band, that hasn't changed in, forever, has it?
No, I don't think so. And I would be hard-pressed to think it will change anytime in the near future, at least.
So in terms of putting on the event, I mean, that's a project management gig, isn't it? It's knowing what your budget is, what's got to happen, who's coming in when, what's going where, etc.
Yeah.
But how has concert promotion changed? I mean, what are you doing now that they weren't doing like 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Well, 5, 10, 15 years ago, they were making really good money. And that's actually changed a lot. But it's for the good and the bad. So even when I started, if we did a really good sellout show, we could walk away with maybe like $6 or $7 grand for a night. But now, because the way it worked for a lot of up and coming artists is they didn't have agents. So we were booking directly with management. But right. Now the game has kind of changed where agencies are scooping up artists as early as they can. So we're no longer dealing with artists as much, but as with agents who want to suck every kind of penny out of us. And so it's good and bad. There's a lot more money going to artists on the live side, but there's the independent promoter is kind of being pushed out because we have a ceiling usually of how much money we can make, but there's no floor with how much we can lose if the show doesn't go well. And so that's why we're seeing in Toronto, it's a big thing, but I'm sure it's the same all over the place. The promoters like Live Nation who own venues, sign acts, and buy whole tours because they don't really mind if they're not getting, if the artist is getting more of the ticket sales because they're going to make the bar sales or they're going to make some door stuff or stuff like that. And so the promotion game is interesting now because it's becoming more and more consolidated. And we're one of the last independent promoters in Toronto, at least, who are doing large scale shows. So in the thousands of people, because it's just completely changed. And that's why we're kind of moving into the artist management, artist services, development kind of game. And so we're stuck in the middle right now, but that's kind of the transition that's happening.
Do you think there's any future for independent music promoters?
I think there is, but it's just about, you have to find your niche, right? Our niche right now is, and what it had been for a long time, was bringing people to Toronto for the first time. So we brought everyone from like Kendrick Lamar to Post Malone to Mac Miller, all these rappers who are big now, we brought them for their first time. And our struggle is we can't hang on to them when they start doing their stadium shows, right? So we have our niche of the clubs, maybe up to 3,000 people. And there's some smaller promoters who are doing okay, doing shows with only a couple hundred people, but doing 5, 6 shows a week, you know? That's kind of where that hustle comes in. And when we were, even me starting out a year or so ago, when I was a bit hungrier and new to it, I could do that. But now it's like looking at it, it doesn't add up anymore, you know?
Right. So what do you do if you're filling, what, 3,000 or 4,000 seats? What are you doing to promote nowadays? What are the tools that you use to promote shows?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. It really depends on who the artist is. So what we try to do is study like physically and digitally where the artist is active and where they found kind of their niche. So if it's an artist that has a fan base of maybe early 20s and lower, it's like Instagram is huge. An older audience, Facebook is huge. Obviously, we do a Facebook event all the time, but it really kind of looks at what kind of social media are they on and like where can we push and kind of latch onto them. And then physically, it's kind of the same thing. Should we be postering or handing out flyers around college campuses or maybe high schools? Should we be in like the hipster area of the city, or do we want to go down to like the finance district? And then
it's just a matter of, you know, artist X is coming to town and you're hoping on brand recognition, or do you have to sell the artist?
Yeah, it depends. What we're trying to work with artists mostly now that brand recognition. But what's happening increasingly right now is like packaged tours. So it's like not only is Andrew coming to town, but Cormac's performing with him. So even if I don't know who you are, I might know who that doesn't make sense. But you know what I'm saying? I might know the second.
I know exactly what you mean, sure. But do they give you access to their lists?
What do you mean?
Well, so if I'm, you know, Andrew, because I'm the newest rapper out of LA, you know, because I'm holding it together for the homies down here. So let's say, you know, I'm selling out 500s, never been to Toronto before. I've got, you know, about 20, 30,000 social followers, and I've got a nice up-to-date mailing list.
Yeah.
How do I work with you to make the best out of it when I get to Toronto?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Part of it is, it all depends on the size of the artist. So when our company did the first Kendrick Lamar show years ago, we actually had a promo video of him speaking into his camera saying, I'm coming to Toronto. I'm coming with Smash Mouth Entertainment. You guys got to be there. Now it might just be they have one stock image of all their tour list dates and they blast that to their mailing list. It really depends. And some artists are really willing to work with you and push stuff out, and some aren't. And that's honestly like kind of where we see ticket sales rise and fall and rise and fall.
I mean, it doesn't matter how big you get, you still got to hustle.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
So bouncing off that and then bouncing into the tech incubator and now the music incubator. Yeah. I mean, does that mean, you know, if I'm a young artist or any artist in Toronto, I can apply to your incubator and you can teach me how to make it as a rock star? No,
it's actually almost the complete opposite.
Because I've never heard, I mean, so what's the name of the incubator again?
So it's called the Music Den. The Music Den at Ryerson University. And we don't do artist development. What we do is we work with people who are working on like the business side of the industry. So if you had a product or a service or some sort of company, then you could apply to the Music Den and we bring you in and you get access to resources like free office space, equipment in terms of like cameras, mics, studios, if you needed to shoot, commercials, crowdfunding videos, things like that. And then we have a mentor network of like Canadian music industry veterans, so from major labels, publishers, entertainment lawyers. But we don't take in people who have an idea. We take people who have here, like maybe they have a proof of concept, and we kind of help them get a step or two. And then when they're at the point where they're going to get some sort of maybe major investment, then they kind of move on from us. So we just found out last week that one of our companies actually got bought by Warner Music, which was a huge win for them. And they were an A&R tool.
I read about that, yeah, and everybody was crapping themselves that Warner are now going to have the jump on, you know, new artists.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that was very exciting for us. So that's what we are trying to do.
Is that government funded, or I mean, is it?
Yeah, so it's government funded, like through the university. So Ontario, the province, has a real kind of innovation agenda right now, and Ryerson, the university, has carved itself out as like a leader in innovation, whatever that means. But part of it means doing this kind of work.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm sitting here in LA, and I don't think there's anything like that here. And I don't think there's, well, there must be, but I mean, it's bloody awesome. I mean, do you have to be Canadian?
Yeah, you have to be Canadian, but that's about where it stops. You don't have to be a student. You can be from anywhere in the country, and that's, yeah.
So we could pick up Musicto. I could get my Canadian citizenship because I've got the British citizenship, and we can just move Musicto and get into the incubator, and we'd be golden.
Exactly.
So you just went to South by Southwest, yeah?
Yeah.
It's been funny. I mean, I've been in the States since '99, and I've been involved in music, you know, since then. I came out to, you know, to pursue music, and you know, was in the rise of tech. You know, I was there when Napster killed the band that I was in. Yeah, and then saw YouTube, you know, MySpace and YouTube came, and then some YouTube was this place for music, and then Facebook came, and then Twitter. And about the same time, you had the growth of South by Southwest as it became, you know, those movies then became more and more of a tech thing. And it was about 05 to 07 where it just went mental, and Twitter exploded and Foursquare exploded. And I don't know, because I've never been, but you see this, you know, what was it like? What was your, well, first off, what were you there for? And then second, what was your impression of Austin this time?
So very briefly, I was there to, so our company Smash Mouth, we actually produced an official South by Southwest showcase this year.
Gotcha.
So that we did a concert where we brought 12 Toronto hip hop artists and did a showcase in front of about 150, 200 people. That was a whole adventure in itself that we can get into if we need. Mm-hmm. South by is definitely it's a beast. I don't know how else to describe it, but if you can imagine walking down a street. Think about whatever street in LA has like a ton of bars, ton of restaurants, whatever. And every bar has its doors open, has its windows open. Every bar is blasting music. So every few steps you walk, it's a new song. And then on every corner, there's also bands or rappers or performers have set up and are also playing music. And so it's like this whole medley of like, you can't even think. All you can do is kind of like experience it and hope you make it out alive.
Well, shit, after the bloody bombings in Austin at the same time.
Literally, I guess. Yeah, exactly. I actually met a guy down there who said one of the bombs had exploded a few houses down from him, which was crazy.
But it sounds a little bit like New Orleans, Bourbon Street, you know, when you're, you know, for Halloween or Mardi Gras. It's an assault on the ears. And that's the question of South by Southwest now. And this was the case, you know, I was on a country gig going back 8 years now. And we looked at the cost of going to South by and the cost of taking the bus down, the band, you know, setting up, booking a gig, and then getting people there. And we fell down on the side of, there probably not the ROI, but it probably didn't make sense unless you had that mid-level connection where you could actually get people to you. And was that gonna, you went and you put together a concert for 12 Toronto acts. Was it worth it?
Yes, I think it was. What I would say, I would definitely say South by isn't worth it if you are an artist and you're going down for one showcase or maybe two showcases. That's not worth it. But where the one thing South by still has is the industry. So we had brought together a bunch of Toronto industry players, whether it was labels, publishers, that had never been in the same room like this before. And so this was something very unique, and the performers were only one part of it. It was like, at one point we had like almost 100 people jammed backstage, because it was like everyone from Toronto wanted to get into like, and they didn't want to be in the front of the stage because, you know, you got to be like cool, you got to be backstage. But it was like, this was like, it was like a niche thing where people could come and congregate and meet each other and see each other where they haven't done it like that before. And we had, like, some of the performances were great and some of the people there were great. And we actually had Jessie Reyes, who is on my list this week. She actually came through, and like, she's a massive artist now, but she came and she was like, this is like Toronto, this is Canada, like where I'm from. And like, everyone was going crazy for that. And so it was like, that was worth it in the sense of like, we had a niche product. Do you know what I mean?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's super interesting that that niche product becomes location.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And we see that, I mean, just, you know, leaping off. I've been educated in rap over the last year. I mean, I'm not your typical, I'm this older dude, grew up with rock music, and look, I love all kinds of music. But it's, you know, it's not something that I've listened to. But now, you know, sitting there and publishing tracks, I mean, I've got, you know, Doran, who's doing New York hip hop, and Reason, who's doing similar kind of, you know, East Coast. But then you've got Adrian, who's got, you know, Southern trap style. And every now and again, you get a, you know, a different thing. And I'm beginning to understand it. I'm beginning to, it's like anything. You know, if you don't understand it, it's like, it's alien, I don't like it. But the more you learn about it, it's like, oh shit, I see what they're doing. Yeah. But there's something very, they talk about East Coast style and West Coast style, and you talk about, and there's something in there, isn't there, in terms of location?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, since, like, that's something that's very prevalent in Toronto right now, whereas like Toronto is trying to find its defining sound. And I don't know if we need one or not. And it's kind of become like, you obviously, even if you're not like a hip hop fan, like Drake's a pop star now for like all things considered. And it's like, his sound is that kind of like infused, whether it's like pop, dance hall, hip hop, R&B kind of stuff. And Toronto has become a bit of that kind of like auto-tuned, like weekend sound as well. But there's like kind of a pushback on that, where Toronto, some people want Toronto's identity to be like not identifiable, if that makes any sense. So it's like, we don't want, there's a movement where people don't really want a Toronto sound, because the issue with that is those sounds become fads and they fade in and they fade out, right? And that's what we're kind of trying to avoid here. Yeah.
But you have, I mean, what got me was Jessie stands up and says, this is Toronto. Mm-hmm. And that feels good. I mean, I come from Scotland, you know, and you stick me in the kill and somebody else is in the kill, and we're like, what? Hey! Because you have that.
Yeah.
One of the earliest lists we did, you know, when we were testing out the concept last year, was Music to Love Berlin, and it was curated by Mishi, who came from Poland, but had, you know, just knew she was born to be in Berlin.
Yeah.
And, you know, she rolled off because it was, you know, part of the, you know, part of establishing the processes. But the list grew fairly well, and it's got me thinking about, you know, the ideas of more music to love, you know, the major cities or to love a major state. Because if you had a Music to Love Toronto playlist, you could put everything and anything on it, couldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. You could, and that would be the good and the bad, right? Because it's hard to curate that. Like, there's a project right now, or not a project, but I guess it's a project going on with City Hall, where Toronto artists can submit their music, and if someone calls the city and they get put on hold, they hear Toronto artists. But then you'll hear like, let's say it's a dance hall artist, and then you'll hear a folk artist, and then you hear like something that's influenced from like somewhere deep in Africa or in Europe or wherever. It's all over the place. And that's one of the beauties of Toronto, is that it's like, it's one of the most diverse cities in the world. And I know a lot of cities say that, but there's a pride in Toronto of like keeping those traditions alive. Do you know what I mean? And not, whereas like, I think the States talks about being a melting pot. Toronto, I think, has a saying where it's more of a mosaic, where it's like, there might be like the Scottish here and the Australian here and the Zimbabwe here and that kind of stuff.
But in a world of playlists, so we're betting the house that, you know, playlists are the new radio. So, and I'm going to want to come back to this idea of location, because I think there's a lot to mine in here. So Spotify just IPO'd, and the initial price had them up at about 37 billion, and they're now down to 122, and so whatever. But with any luck, this will work. And, you know, they haven't made a profit, and they've still got to, you know, if they increase, it's still difficult for them. But it's still the only way, you know, new artists are going to be making money, because, you know, they're not selling downloads, and sure, CDs at shows are great, but, you know, touring is expensive and blah, blah, blah. It still seems to me to be the future.
Yeah. So
if you have, you know, if it is about streaming, which is basically on demand, then, you know, the radio station, which is push, is going to decline. It's going to be about identifying around brands that you want to go back to and see what they have for you. And that's really the essence of what the Musicto idea is. It's this branded playlist around a construct, whether it's behavioral, as is yours. I think location could be something. So if you're a proud Torontoan, Tarantian, whatever, if there was a Music to Love Toronto playlist, I mean, it's pretty easy to subscribe, and then you check in, what are they playing this year, and then you learn something new. That to me would make sense. Or am I just off base? What do you think?
I think in theory it makes sense. I think in practical terms, I think you'd have to have a section that off even more, whether you do it by Toronto folk or Toronto dance underground, or if you do it by section of the city. So to love Toronto, we have different boroughs similar to New York. So Etobicoke, downtown, East End, Scarborough, Richmond Hill up north. I think that's like, if you look at any, like there's all these, especially in hip hop, people are looking at Toronto right now, and there's all these articles coming out where it's like 10 rappers from Toronto you need to know, or 10 of this, and it's always different, and it's always just because of the person's personal feeling, right? And it's like, you're never going to actually encapsulate the feeling of the city, but you might be able to capture the feeling of one niche part of the city. And I think that would speak more strongly to a group of people.
Yeah, but it's still niche-y though, isn't it? I mean, it's still, we look at the listener as if they only like one kind of music. We look at, we're still categorizing it by hip hop or by rap or by whatever. And I see the playlist coming in, and sure, I mean, like Adrian's list is, you know, Southern dirty trap, whatever, and all of it's like that. But, you know, occasionally you look at, you know, one of Regan's list, and you'll have, you know, an R&B track will come in, or a soul track or whatever. And it's, I think, I don't know. I mean, I like the idea of location because I think it gives something different than just music niche to hold on to. And if it's done well, I mean, going back to just if there was a Toronto list, we know that we need money to market the lists. So now, like, looping off onto a second thing, I mean, Twitter's pretty easy to grow. You know, we can use automation, and it's easy to identify and touch people with your list. So it's not easy, it's hard, but it takes time. But that's pretty understandable. Instagram's pretty straightforward as well.
Mm-hmm.
The elephant in the room is Facebook. The only
Yeah.
way to grow your Facebook audience nowadays is, yes, you've got to show up, but is to advertise, is to do super targeted Cambridge Analytica style marketing. And I think in the ideal world, every Musicto playlist has $1 a day Facebook budget. That's enough to take it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had the Toronto list that week, you could do your buck a day budget targeting that specific location.
Yeah, yeah.
That to me would work brilliantly, and it would work in LA. It would work in all these major cities. And now I'm sitting here thinking that that's something we should look at.
Talk about, yeah.
Location-based lists, because coming back to the business side of it, business is marketing. Yeah, I mean, we have lost playlist curators because they don't have the time to share out the list, and that's. We're very upfront with people nowadays. I mean, I think I've moved on the front page. If you want to be a Musicto curator, you need up to 15 minutes a day.
Wow, yeah. Still, what, 5 or so?
Yeah. 5, yeah. And I'm massively upfront. I mean, we've got, we will be at 50 active lists, maybe by the end of this weekend into early next week. And I have not reached out to the 70 curator applications that have come in since the beginning of February. Until we've cleared that backlog and moved forward. So going back to the point, it is about marketing. If you want to just make a playlist, you can do that anywhere. Don't do it at Musicto, because what we're about is actively building those audiences. Yeah. So how have your playlist, Music to Catch Feelings, what's been your experience like running it?
It's been an interesting one. And it's something that I don't think I've fully figured out my best practices around it. It's like, first off, it's fun. I love doing it because it's similar to how we talked. Like, I would be kind of collecting music this way anyways, but you're right. It's the marketing side that takes on a whole other life. And I think in some aspects I'm doing okay. I've been like, the Instagram is growing decently. The Twitter is growing okay. I think we're about just over 500 followers now, which is all right. But I've been trying different things. And so when I first started off, we'll talk about Twitter because that's been something I've been focusing on the last few weeks. I started trying to do a lot of artist-focused stuff. So targeting people who like the artist, tweeting a lot about the artist, and then trying to get their followers to follow me. But I found my return wasn't as good as I thought it would be. And now that might have just been my strategy. But what I found is working more for me is like playing up on the actual catch feelings kind of meme, for lack of a better word. And because there's a lot of like a whole internet culture around catching feelings, and you don't want to do it or you do want to do it, right? And so what I've started to mix in is still stuff about the artist, still stuff about music, but other stuff that's just like GIFs or images that are funny about like, oh, don't catch feelings, but if you do, like, we've got some sounds for you. And that's starting to get more engagement, which is kind of surprising for me, but it's an interesting side of it.
I love this, because this is the whole bloody thing, isn't it? Yeah. It's playlists based around behaviors or emotions or constructs that are not normally associated with music.
Yeah.
So I think that's super cool. I mean, it's so applicable back to everybody else, because at the moment we're teaching new curators to go down the music road, to identify, run hashtags based on the track name or based on the artist, and then interact with the fans and get them back. But I think that's a great takeaway from this session, to say, hey, now let's bring in another aspect of Twitter and let's focus on the the actual nature of the playlist. I think that's super cool.
Yeah, and something I'm trying to think a lot about right now is like, what kind of behavior, like what kind of behavioral stuff should I be tweeting about along with just the standard catching feelings? Like, there's not exactly actions always associated with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I was running the playlist to take shots and tote bombs. Like there's a lot there. Do you know what I mean? But the catching feelings is more abstract. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, at what moment in the day or like where are they going to be and they might want to put on this playlist. So I've started trying to tweet stuff like up late in bed, like thinking about that person, like put on our track, like, you know, kind of stuff like that around that.
I think that's super cool. Do you need to, I mean, you use images, don't you?
Yeah.
So do you need, what kind of tech chops do you need to be able to produce those images, or is that pretty straightforward?
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, I rip a ton of stuff off like Reddit and Tumblr and stuff like that. And when I need to make something, I just use Canva, which is just a free service that I'm sure you've heard of and many people have heard of. But yeah, I just log on, quick text, drag in some images, drop them in and just go. Or just use Giphy if I'm trying to make a GIF, bring in a YouTube video and throw it up.
It's brilliant. I love it. So what about track submissions? Because our track submissions are going through the roof. I mean, the objective for the first half of this year was to get to 100 curators. And we could technically, we would do that without a blink. And I have put the throttle on that because I want to ensure culture is right and systems and processes are right.
Yeah.
I reckon we'll probably get to about 75, 80.
Mm-hmm.
But there'll be, good, quality people that are bedded in. So for the first quarter, we had the front page of Musicto was set up as come and be as a curator. That was the primary call to action.
Yeah.
But what's driving us is not everybody wants to be a curator, but everybody wants to get on a Spotify playlist.
Yeah.
So what is driving our visibility is that we are curators of Spotify playlists, and submit a track is when we had Be a Curator as the front page, submit a track was often more popular than the front page of the website. That's where people were coming in.
Yeah.
So, and I see our track submissions are blowing. We're getting 400-500 a month and growing and getting. So what's your experience like on Catch Feelings? How many, what kind of tracks are you, how many tracks are you getting a month?
I don't know how many I'm getting a month. I would say, I think I have about 80 that I haven't even looked at right now. And I had them empty at January. So in the last 3 months, I've had at least 80. I try to look at them a few every week or a few every 2 weeks. So I'd say I have about 100 since the new year. Sorry.
Pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah.
So, but this is the conversation I love to have with the curators, because here's what I know to be true. If you run a successful list, you get inundated. You've got way too many tracks to listen to, and you're not going to get to listen to. There are companies out there that are putting paywalls in between. And Submit Hub, I'm a fan. I took it out for a spin, and I still have my Grieve To list on there.
Yeah.
And they are paying you, to listen to the track and give feedback. Mm-hmm. But on average, they're listening to the track for 20 seconds or maybe 40 seconds, and that's not enough.
Yeah,
I don't think. And also, I remember what it's like when you're broke in a band and you have no money and you have no credit card, and even $5 to get your song listened to by some, it feels ethically wrong to me. Yeah. But what's the solution? And the way we're set up on Musicto is give us more of your time. We've got this submission form. And I see every submission that comes into the site because it all goes through the Musicto mail. And I've adopted a brutal approach for the essay list and for Grieve To, is that if I don't see at least a paragraph of text in each of those blocks, I just done.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think of that?
I agree with that. I mean, it's too draining to go through everything. On top of that, what I look for is like, if I actually read it, what I'm looking for is like a story. Because as I'm sure you know through my submissions, is I want to try to tell a story with each song. And if you're just writing a text to me about like, this song is great for your playlist, like, I don't really care. I have like millions of songs that are good for the playlist, but it's like, why? What makes you special? And so what I've lost artists, I guess, at a point where, because if I like the track, I'll reach back out to them and say like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, or give me some ideas for what I could write up about you. And if they don't respond, or if it's lazy, like, they're not getting on the playlist. And so I think I've only published one so far that was a submission. And I have some ones that are kind of in the pipeline, but I think you got to be brutal. I think like that's the real world, right? Like when I'm pitching the artists I manage to like the Spotify Canada team, like they're brutal. So it filters down, right?
When you say they're brutal, can you give us a little insight into that?
Well, it's just like they're very honest with like, you are the 1,000th person to email me today. And basically like, why should I care? And if you're not ready to tell them why they should care, like they want to know why they should care before they listen to the music. Like there's like a famous story in like hip hop and R&B right now of Black, who's on my playlist as well. And he was one of the first artists to blow up via Apple Music, but it wasn't like the curators of Apple Music went out and found him. Like if you read interviews, the curator had heard from like his cousin and his best friend, and then the manager emailed him, and then he emailed the manager back, and then it started this whole dialogue between them, right? And so it's like, you need to find some way to break those walls down. And it's not because people don't want to listen to your music, but it's just because they physically can't, right? And so you need to have some sort of story or unique aspect that's going to make it worth it for them, because by putting you on a playlist, they're investing in you, right? And they need to make that return back.
I think, just having this discussion, and I love these discussions, and it's true, we could, talk for the next year, but I think revisiting the track submission form, I think is super important. I'm also considering revisiting, removing the generic track submission form, because there's two types of submissions. There's when you're on the landing page. Yeah. That's a much better quality track submission. Because we have a generic, submit your track here, and still, even though I've written that Medium article that says, before you submit your track, click here, we get a load of referral traffic. That gets about a couple of hundred reads a week. Wow. We still get, what playlist are you submitting this for? Rap Caviar. Why should we listen to it? Yeah. We're here all year. And you want to go, I mean, if we're getting enough track submissions through from the individual playlists, I am beginning to think that the submitted track page should be the list of the playlists, and then it should be click on the playlist to submit your track. Yeah. That would totally tighten up the track submission, and it would get rid of all the bullshit ones to, we're not fucking curating this list or this list, whatever. Yeah, exactly. But then on the track submission, because right now it's just a pop-up button, as if we hit the pop-up button, and right now, if I remember, it's, name, whatever, and, track, and then tell us why. If we flip that and make the first, thing a text box that says, this is the most important part of this form. Yeah. Tell us why. This is what we will read before we even look at the name or before we listen to your track. Give us a couple of paragraphs. Take 5 minutes of your time to tell us why this track is a great fit for this playlist. Exactly. You take that first thing? I think that is very smart. And I think that ties back into what we were talking about earlier about the curators who couldn't take the time to market themselves. Like, this is the artists and their teams. It's the exact same thing, right? Like, you can make the best music in the world, but if it's not connecting with me, or your story isn't connecting with me, it doesn't matter, right? And that's not me trying to put myself on a pedestal, but it's with anyone, right? I've seen 75 human beings come through Musicto. And I've spoken to a lot of people. I've spoken to over 100 Skype interviews, 75 people who decided to move forward, and really only about 60 who started. And then, we've lost, 20, whatever, or 15, whatever. And you've got to be a little bit nuts to do this. I mean, you have to really bloody want to be involved in music and curate a list. And I mean, I say to the new curators, it's like having a kid now, or like having a puppy or a pet.
Exactly.
Because it becomes part of your life.
100%. And it's actually one of my, I love the part of the day. So every morning when I get up, like I eat breakfast and I go to the office, and the first thing I do is sit down and do music too. And it's whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but I have it blocked off 8:30 to 9 a.m. every day is music too. And it's like, it's kind of refreshing in a sense. Do you know what I mean? And I just know it's there and it's enjoyable and it's done. But it's like, it helps me start my day, which is a funny thing.
I'm going to re-ask you that question. Okay, so what you just said is you go into your office and you block out. Tell me again. You block out half an hour. Just go. Yeah.
So I go into the office and I block out every morning from 8:30 to 9, and it's just music too. And so what I've done actually is I have my daily social tasks that I made for myself, and it plays off what we do. And Monday is Spotify, and I have some goals for that weekend. Tuesday is share day, and I have some goals for that weekend. Every day just is a refresher for me. It feels like I feel energized after doing it because it's super fun, but it's also challenging. And every week I kind of have these goals where I want to hit a certain number of followers or get a certain amount of likes or a certain amount of listens. And I completely kind of obsess over, like, I actually gave myself extra time this morning to pour over the Q1 stuff because I wanted to see, like, okay, how am I doing versus this person or versus this person? And something I ended up taking is looking at the percentage growth on Twitter and people who were growing by like 70% or more. I've made a note now where every Monday I'm going to check in to see what they did on Twitter last week and try to mimic them because I really want to push my Twitter more. And so, yeah, it all goes back to like having that every day it adds up and it feels good and it feels exciting. Especially because, you know, even running this list could be a little stressful when life is going on and whatever, but just knowing that 30 minutes and you're done and it's like, it's awesome. I love doing it.
I think this is, I mean, it's amazing. I run 2 lists and I got to get rid of one. And I don't know what to do. Because, you know, I have a consulting business that pays for the growth of Musicto. And then I'm growing Musicto, which is a 40, 50 hour a week gig. Just, you know, to grow it and keep it happening and whatever. And then I've got my 2 playlists. Yeah. And I know I'm letting myself down at the moment because I'm not pushing them as much as if I just had one. Yeah. So how, I mean, and going back to the point that you made about, you know, the memes that you've got about catch feelings, the thing that grows the Music to Grief to list is grief, is grieving community. You know, we did this, I did a test, you know, list sponsorship with a lady that I met on Twitter who does grief Reiki. And then we got to know each other because she was retweeting my stuff and I was retweeting her. And then I just thought, fuck it. I reached out to her over Christmas and said, should we get on Skype? Let's have a chat. And she was like, who are you, random dude? And she wanted to do an online course. And I said, well, look, let's work together. And, you know, so it's turned into a beautiful relationship. And now we were doing every Wednesday, but now every Monday, we have a 30-minute live conversation on the Music to Grief to Facebook page where we talk about an aspect of grief. You know, we've got a list of about 30 or 40 because she's a professional grief counselor. Yeah. I've already selected my grief track for the week. So like the first half is we're talking about an area of grief. And then the second half, we're talking about the track and how that relates. That becomes a YouTube video, which we then download. That becomes embedded onto the track page. We can then also take vignettes from that video and distribute across her network and my network. And it's bloody brilliant. Yeah. So, but going back to the list sponsorship, she sponsored the Grief to list and it was driving people into her online course. And we sent her, not human, 20, 30, 40 qualified leads into her online course that, you know, Google, you would have needed to have tens of thousands of humans to get the, you know, the real qualified individual. And that gives me hope. we've got Flo. Do you know who Ariel Hyatt is? Cyber PR?
No.
She's been around the business a long time in the indie world, based out in Boston. She's now working, she does artist PR. So she and I go back away, but they are sponsoring the essay writing list. So they launched their new album Flow, and it's instrumental music and it's new agey. It's perfect for the essay list. So we're going to see if we can move the needle on their Spotify plays. And, you know, we're at that point where we're just monetizing, but it's about relationships, and it's about getting something back from it. I don't know, I'm rambling, but it is exciting.
It's 100%, yeah. And it's funny, like when you're building a business like this, and this is one of the reasons that I love getting involved with Musicto, is it's like it's a backstage to another kind of like startup company that I work with all the time, whether it's Smash Mouth or at the Music Den. But like it's those little wins that keep you going, right? Like you might have a shit week, or you might have a great day and then a shit day and a great day and a shit day, but it's like those like great little things have to add up and like just push you to the next one, you know?
The scariest thing is, I mean, I come from a professional executive background, and it's KPIs. KPIs are everything. I mean, when you start looking at the data, our organic traffic grew 80% quarter on quarter. That's insane. I mean, if there's ever an indicator of this is working and will continue to work, there you go. I mean, even if everybody decided they weren't going to share on social, we have, which actually would kill us because but it would. We're already on, you know, a tangent that's going to take us where we need to be. It's just the challenge for us. Well, certainly, as I say, from the reports that I published this week, is getting community right, you know, onboarding people right, getting sharing right, getting behavior right, and that's massively important. And then it's monetization. It's if we can make a buck or two. It's going to take longer. I originally thought it would take about 40 weeks. I think it's going to take about 1.5 years. I mean, it's just to get to that point where you can send direct traffic, you know, relevant traffic to a company, you know, where you've got a big enough audience that you can move the needle on Spotify, or you can sign a track.
You've got to be undeniable, right? It can't be like, we might move your needle. It's got to be like, this is going to happen. This works.
Yeah. And it's data. I mean, at the end of the month, after we promote this track on the essay list, you know, I know how many streams they started with at the beginning of the month. I'll know what they did. I'll know what the traffic to Musicto was, you know, what the activity was, what the end of the streams was, and then we'll have a data set. And then it'll be, okay, this is how we grow it on the other list.
Yeah, just replicate it. Yeah.
So finally, on the DJ front, I mean, how often do you get out?
It depends. I try to do at least like once a week is kind of like my standard right now. But then sometimes it'll all depend on different, like I do the clubs, but then private parties. And I've been trying to move into more like brand stuff. So like clothing launches, stuff like that, because it's a bit more fun. You don't have like 10 screaming girls coming up to you being like, play this song. It's more like, it's chiller. You know what I mean? And I spun a bit down in Texas, which was cool. But that's like a passion thing. I love that a lot. And it's, I've got a good relationship with managers at a couple bars and clubs in Toronto. So when they need someone, they'll hit me up. But yeah, it's like, it's just side gig, a little money, but just like a ton of fun. Yeah.
But it's I love that with the managers, because I would imagine you're the same professionalism when you're there. I mean, that always cracks me up. You're coming up in the music business, and people want to be a guitar player, and they're like, man, I've got to be really high to do this thing. It's like, no. I was in a band, and Matt McJunkins, who plays with the bass player for Perfect Circle, he's now got the Beta Machine, and he's done super, super well. Yeah. In fact, he was playing for the Eagles of Death Metal, the Bataclan, and survived.
Oh, wow.
But he came through as a gigging musician. I was the music director on this gig, and just consummate brilliant player. But you know what? He was there on time. He'd learned the parts. he listened well, and he was. I say it doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether the music business isn't this rock and roll drug lifestyle. If you want to succeed in it, you've got to be as tough, as professional as anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And especially because, like, especially in DJing, there's 1,000 DJs who could go to a club and press play and spin records, right? So it's all about the relationships you build. And it's exactly what you said, being on time, being professional and courteous, like basically just not being a dick. And it's pretty straightforward, but sometimes that's hard. Like if someone's yelling in your face or someone puked in the booth beside you or whatever, but it's like, you gotta try to kind of find your center, right? And play the long game with it is how I try to look at it.
It's brilliant, isn't it? So, I mean, again, where did the hour go? It's so I'm playing with this question at the end of these interviews, and and I don't quite know how it's working, but we'll see. This exists. This interview exists now, and we'll download it and we'll post it on YouTube, and it will be there in time. So jump forward 3 years, and everything has worked. So Music to Catch Feelings is one of the most popular playlists on the planet. And people are desperate to get on it, and it's all
curly, yeah.
And you're making a living from it because you're signing individual tracks and you've got promotions and you are, this curator. If you go back and you watch this video, so this final question of, what would you want to say to yourself now? How would you like to finish this video that you can look back and go, yes, that was cool?
What would I want to say to myself in the future? Like advice or something, or?
Well, help me work out this question, because I often go back and look at stuff that I've done in the past.
Okay.
And when you're at the beginning of a journey, you never know whether it's going to work.
Yeah. No.
So I think the question is, imagine that you are yourself in the future and it's successful. What would you say to yourself now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, okay. I understand what you're saying, and I have an answer that's a bit diluted, and we might need to formulate it together as well. But it's like everyone, as I'm sure, like everyone I know in the music business doesn't have just one thing, right? It's like multiple things, and so with me, it's like the concerts, the management, DJ, music den, and music too, and I think it's about figuring out how to find like the synthesis of those things so that it's no longer I do concert production and I do music too and I do whatever. It's like all these 3 things or 5 things or whatever are interconnected. And I think that would be success, where it's like, sure, it'd be great to be like a huge famous curator, but I think what's much more realistic is that like I'm a curator who does concerts and DJing, and I'm all kind of known for all of it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that that is the goal for me. There's some people in Toronto who do that very well right now. They're like DJs that I look up to who are also kind of brand ambassadors, but they're writers, but they do some hosting duties. And it's like, they're not known for one thing. They're just known for like them. And people know that they can do all of this. And that's the goal. Like, how do I find that synthesis of all of that? So that's very rambly, but I hope it makes some sense.
I love it. I love it. And it helps me develop that question a little better. But the idea of growing Catch Feelings to a point where you get this killer track submission that they've taken the time and you fall in love with that track and you put it on the list and then you introduce it into a DJ set that you're spinning, and people are digging that, and then you contact them through Smash Mouth and then you put on their first live show and it all came because of the that would be fucking amazing, wouldn't it?
Exactly. That would be like the dream come true.
Well, let us set an intent for that to be the case, for that to happen.
Amazing.
Cormac is brilliant. Thank you for the time. I've loved this. And we'll get to do this again. We've only got another, 30 plus curators to interview, and then hopefully we'll come back. Stick around after I've closed this because we'll still be on. But
cool.
This will be up and about later on. I think there are a couple of cool vignettes that we can take out of it as well. We will catch you on the flip. Take care.